One more thing, speaking with Ian Anderson of the legendary band Jethro, Tull, I suspect a lot of people would appreciate if you could share one bit of advice to someone who is thinking about a career in music and has a passion and has a obviously God-given talent. What would you tell them in 2010 that would perhaps help them in their endeavor?
Well, it would be the rather depressing news, which is the old adage in show business: don't give up your day job. And unfortunately, in 2010, that's all the more relevant than it ever has been, because it's an incredibly competitive world with relatively few vacancies. And I think the great joy in being a musician is to be an amateur. I mean, the very name amateur, it is to be in love with what it is you do. And you don't necessarily have to get paid for it or get paid very much for it. You know, you should do it because you love doing it. And, you know, one thing I've said to some young musicians is, you know, I'm a professional musician between the hours of 8 and 10:30 or whatever it is on nights when I happen to have a gig. The rest of the time, I'm an amateur. You know, when I go in my dressing room between now and showtime, I'm going to be playing some music just for fun, you know, as an amateur musician, because I love doing it, but not because someone's there listening to me with, you know, emptying their wallet in my general direction. It's so there's no indignity in being an amateur musician. Far from it. I think there's the great joy of having something that you hold close to you as a real, perhaps quite private way of expressing yourself, and maybe you share that with your family or friends, or to some small audience in a bar somewhere or whatever, or at a family wedding or whatever it might be. But I think that's the real joy in being a musician, and so I don't think people should take up music necessarily because they aspire to be, you know, making tons of money and jetting around the globe and selling 1 million records, because that is not going to happen anymore. No one sells 1 million records anymore. You might be responsible for 1 million downloads, but you're probably only going to get paid for about 1,000 of them. So it's I mean, I speak as someone who saw his iTunes statement the other day. I just thought, this is what we've come to after all these years.
And for one reason only, people can get them for free, so they do. It's theft, but it's the way of the world.
Well, it's become the culturally accepted norm just to take what's out there. But the problem is that for young musicians who want to try to find a way forward professionally as musicians, should they be determined to do that, then they can't realistically expect to, you know, to make very much money at it, if indeed anything at all. And I think that's, in a way, it's a little belittling and a little soul-destroying, you know, not to be able to earn your living, even at a basic level, from being a musician. Whether you are a classical musician or a jazz musician or a rock musician, it's a real struggle now just to, you know, to try and pay the rent. My son is in a band, and he's, you know, he knows really a lot about the industry. He's done every job in terms of, you know, from production manager, lighting guy, I mean everything. He's done all that stuff, and he likes to play. I mean, he's played with me a lot of the time on solo tours and orchestral tours as a drummer. But he, you know, he writes some music and he plays stuff, and he has a band of varying sizes according to how, you know, what the gig is. And he said to me 2 years ago, I'm just going to give this 1 year, and if I can make something happen, then I'll stick with it. If not, you know, I'm not going to prolong the agony. And 2 years later, he's still trying, you know, and I just think, well, good for you to be trying, but it must be just weighing heavily that, you know, out there, Dad's still treading the boards and earning a dishonest living, while he, as a young musician, is just trying to get past that initial point of recognition. And, you know, I mean, he's in a band that people have heard of in London, and then they get a few gigs here and there, but it's not it's not the way that it used to be when you could, there'd be a buzz about you and it would just increase exponentially every week. It was, you know, it was just a huge explosion, and that's what happened in the in the latter 60s, particularly when I was doing it. But I think before that, even in the earlier 60s with the bands like the Beatles, you know, things really just moved, and from within a period of 6 months, you know, you could just see this amazing track to some kind of real success, and it was very inspiring creatively for young musicians back then. But I just don't think those days are coming back. There's a lot of people out there making lots of great music and doing a good job, but I just don't think they're going to get noticed. You're not going to get noticed just because you have a MySpace site.
Tell us your son's band's name.
Well, it's a group called the Fancy Toys, and so if you go after the Fancy Toys on an internet search, you will see him. But he doesn't go under the name Anderson, so you might miss him.
I found him
but quite intentionally.
I found Fancy Toys on JethroTull.com. You can do the same. You can find all kinds of things on Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull at legendsofclassicrock.ca.